Everybody, welcome back to Eggs, the podcast. Today's special guest is Benjamin Johnson. He's the CEO and co-founder at Particle 41. Benjamin, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for making time for us today. It's awesome to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we know you're the founder and CEO of Particle 41, but there had to be a time before that where you were just dipping your feet in. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into tech, and what you do?
Yeah, so I've been in tech for a long time, it feels. First thing I did was I started a company out of college that was an online travel agency. So if you can imagine being one of the first sites, Travelocity and Expedia was around, but like Orbitz wasn't around. And so we had to rack and stack our own hardware, and there was no cloud. There's none of that fancy stuff that the kids are used to today. So we had to build the internet, and we did it in a storefront building in West Texas. So
Wow.
That's my garage band story. Diesel generator outside for power backup, and, rolling it the hard way. The kids would call it raw dogging today.
Love it.
But yeah, started that and did a couple of online marketing companies, one in finance and one in travel, kind of continued that travel into a travel marketing company and finance. And then my latest venture, we created Legal Inc. In March of 2015 and sold it to LegalZoom in about March of 2018. And then did a SaaS company between now and then. And now I really focus on services. So out of all those ventures, what I really honed in on was the skill of creating elite teams. And so Particle 41 is a place where you can get elite teammates, including fractional CTO and end-to-end product development services.
Love it. Can you, okay, first off, I have to ask, when you were setting up your own servers and stuff in the garage, were you, that had to be a cluster. Was it Nginx? How'd you do it? What was the setup with that?
So this is a long time ago, man. We're talking like, this is a long time ago. This is like Windows NT days. We're talking about 2000. So we're not rolling Linux. We're rolling Windows. We were actually had kind of catapulted our development using a language called Cold Fusion, which is maybe around in some like nuances these days, but we're rolling in Cold Fusion. We eventually replaced everything with .NET, but yeah, we had to figure out how to load balance T1 lines. And once we figured out that the telecom companies were charging us a ton to get from Dallas, like from the information superhighway to West Texas, we eventually moved to a data center in Dallas. And that was a great day because we reduced our cost by 50%, but increased our level of service and, what we were capable of. So yeah, we eventually moved to a proper data center in Dallas, but not after we built that storefront data center and try to make it float high volume sales.
I love that because one of the things we haven't really talked more than for a few minutes, but both Ryan and I kind of dabble in web development, software development, stuff like that. And one of my main concerns in that world is I'm going to pull a move where I set up the wrong service and get a huge bill and can't cover it. That's always on the top of my head. And hearing stories like you're setting up your own server and realizing that, they're charging me this much for this, here's a workaround, and you cut your expenses in half. That's a real learning experience and something that I'm sure kind of.
So I've done this cloud analysis. I mean, when you're in the startup world or when you're in a lower cash position, you certainly don't want to be going to your boss and saying, hey, I need 50, 100 grand for servers. And by the way, that won't be resilient or have like if a hardware goes bad, we're probably going to be down. So you wouldn't really, if you're starting something today and you didn't know what the capacity footprint was, you certainly wouldn't do on-prem or go buy hardware. You would go to the cloud. And then for the fear that you're kind of mentioning there, I have found at least Amazon, Azure, and Google Cloud to be very forgiving if you're like, yeah, I created an extra large database and I really just needed a small one and I'm out my cost. Could you do me a solid here? usually if you do it in a short amount of time between when the cost was incurred and when the ticket was opened, they'll kind of sweep it under the rug and do you a favor. So I haven't seen that fear get realized. The great thing about the cloud is it's all on demand. You're dealing with what you need. You're figuring out your capacity. And then lately we've had some companies like 37 Signals, the folks that do Basecamp, and they've come back and said, oh, we're going to save money by lighting up our own data center. And quite frankly, the reason why they're able to say that is they know their capacity, right? They know exactly what they need. And so they can go do the cost calculation between the support that like a cloud provider would give them. They can kind of factor that into their existing labor. And then they can kind of chase the lower cost. Most businesses don't know what that capacity is. They need the elasticity of the cloud and to kind of be able to determine that. Because if you go buy hardware, you have to buy for the maximum, right? You have to plan ahead. And that traditional capacity planning is expensive. So anytime I've ever seen it, the cost benefit analysis, it would take you like 24 months of owning the hardware in order to beat the cloud. And by then your business has usually changed anyways. So I've always had really good conversations with CFOs over the cloud versus on-prem.
My concern mainly stems on I've read articles where people will use like a back-end application like Supabase or Convex or something like that, and then all of a sudden they get these huge astronomical bills for stuff that what do I do?
Sure.
And it's kind of scary, but at the same time you have to jump off that ledge and take that first leap and see what happens before you even know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's happening with AI products right now. Like, hey, it would be really cool if we asked like 5 questions of ChatGPT to get one answer in like one result. And like, some of these AI challenges are pretty expensive when it comes down to actually solving them.
Yeah. Well, we just jumped right into technical stuff. Ryan, do you have a non-technical?
Well, I was going to back you out a little bit and just talk a little bit about sort of your entrepreneurial journey. So, I mean, you talked about, working on a number of different SaaS products, things like that. I think there's a lot of people, especially folks in our audience, are largely, CEOs or founders. A lot of other folks are, thinking about becoming a founder or starting a business. I wonder if you'd talk to us a little bit about just sort of your process in terms of like vetting an idea and deciding this is one we're going to go with.
Yeah, I think for me, being a technical co-founder, I am usually the number 2 guy. And I, in fact, look for my founder partner. I look for somebody who has a great idea, knows their industry, is confident, borderline obsessed with their idea and their belief that no one is doing what I'm going to do, what my vision is unique. And they're obsessed about the uniqueness of their vision. And then they're willing to like grind. And then the other thing is like the self-learning that I see them doing, that I witness off the jump, is like off the charts. So I think a founder and an entrepreneur has to be like, if they have one skill, that they're self-learning, and their just kind of their passion for what they want to do has to be there. And then the throughput. And so if I see those things, man, I attach to those folks. And just love to I love to help make them rich, really. At the end of the day, that's my mission, is to see their vision through.
So let's extend that then to, your current venture, which is Particle 41. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, sort of the impetus behind creating that in the first place, what challenge you were trying to solve. And then, talk to us a little bit about that company and how it works, what it does.
Yeah. So I think there's, outsourcing is this kind of almost like a negative word, especially in Silicon Valley. You're talking to the big Silicon Valley VCs. They're kind of like, outsourcing, what are you doing that for? I have typically always outsourced, even when I was the technical co-founder. And I think it actually works great. Setting up software factories around your idea can be great, as long as there's a set of principles and best practices that are being, like when the individuals that are working on the code, they make the commitments to the deadlines. There's like these principles that when they're in place, just work. And as I would start each venture, I would go kind of survey the market and just wouldn't find the kind of teams that I really wanted to work with. And so my business partner, who's an Indian national, we've known each other for 20 plus years. He and I started working together on each of my ventures. And then Particle 41 really just became an extension of the way I like to partner with people. So like, and that's why I offer the fractional CTO, interim CTO role, is because I want to be that guy that partners with the idea man, the visionary, and goes and makes it happen. And so we've just turned that into an external service, but we really have tried to make the company feel and our brand promise be very analogous to if you were lighting up an engineering team that was going to partner with you and be beside you, much like I would build a team internally. I'm just letting that be an external fixed month resource for the companies that I work with.
So when you fractionals is like a hot button these days. You got the fractional CTOs, the fractional accountants, the fractional everything.
Right.
As a person that's approaching you to work with them, how does the initial consult go? And are you just trying to analyze what kind of budget they have to work to see how much resources you can offer them? Or are you kind of like, tell me how the first consult goes and what you discuss?
In very much like I talked about interviewing my co-founder, or the founder of a business, is very similar. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your mission? Tell me a little bit about the business. I love to get my hands on the P&L because then I can see all the things that they're spending, tech things they're spending money on. And what we're attempting to do in the first couple of sessions is figure out what technology are they already subscribed to. I call it the periodic table of business tools.
Sure.
And we're looking at like, okay, did they choose Google Workspace as their primary communication platform, or are they on Office 365?
Yeah.
Well, you tell a lot about a business and what things that they already have access to. Are they using Slack, but yet they're paying for Office 365? So they might have Teams at no cost, but yet they're paying for Slack, which can be a conscious choice, or it could be an overspend. So we do some like lay of the land to establish what is their unique particle, like what different IT solutions have they already committed to. And then we start to lay over the customer experience on top of that, because I will tell you how many people I've run into that tried to put off the shelf like product in front of their customer, and it never delivers. It's like, then you run up into all these limitations. Salesforce has some kind of like canvas platform that they try to put in front of it's a mess, right? So we want to figure out what is that place where they're really interacting with the customer, because that's most likely where a custom experience needs to be created.
Weren't you in a situation like that, Ryan, where you had to come in and work with a company where they were getting a throttle limit on the API for their back end, and it was an off-the-shelf kind of thing, and they weren't able to actually do what they wanted because the API they built it off wouldn't actually allow them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, and we've had a lot of cases like that. So, I mean, it's the sort of thing that, I think having better people up front would have been in service of, or would have helped us solve these problems in the first place. It's like, this is one of the big challenges that I think a lot of people, or deal with. And I think we maybe extend this to, some other questions, but I think a lot of times, like, so in my case, I'm somewhat technical, but not highly technical. I kind of phrase it like that. I hate to say non-technical because I grew up with the internet. If I wanted to be online, I had to build a website. Like, I mean, I understand basic technology and things like that. But I'm working nowadays with a lot of software development, and that's a little bit of a bridge too far. So for those guys, I wouldn't dare claim I'm technical, but I am somewhere in between. And
yeah,
so
I was just thinking of that project you had Eric work on a few years ago. That when he said off the shelf, that kind of put that in my forefront because it was. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's just like you have these great solutions like NetSuite, Salesforce, I've even seen WordPress go too far, right? Go too far where you have members logging into some kind of sales WordPress backend. And that's where we just say, like, look, if this is what's going to make you different in the market, there's an old, probably like a McKinsey or McPherson kind of consulting thing. It's high need versus high value. So high need is at the top, high value, or high need is at the bottom, high value is at the top of the stack. And we say, just about every business is going to need a way to do compute and a way to store data. That's a good example of like high need. So it's great to go find IT vendors that would help you with, that's why cloud is so popular. That's why and then as you go up from there, you get a little bit more like in the middle, there's always going to be like, you're going to use QuickBooks for accounting. You might use some marketing tools. You're certainly not going to build those, but you're going to lease them. You're going to SaaS them, and then you're going to configure the crap out of them to make you different. But at that upper layer where you're high need, high value, that's where you really should spend the money and the time customizing and doing some custom applications, because that's what's going to make you different in the market. So like your core value proposition might be a super cool mobile app. And so don't try to do some kind of low code, no code BS on that mobile app, because you're going to run into limitations. You're not going to end up, you're going to get only so far as that provider allows you to go, and you're going to end up unhappy. So this is kind of spilling the beans on kind of my, my consult and walking through that and really justifying why we want to do custom, because it's really going to make the business different.
Yeah. Love it. Well, and I guess kind of finished my thought too. The sort of the lack of the technical not necessarily founder in my case, but like the person who's employing the technical people. What happens or sort of what happened in the instance that Mike was referring to was that somebody who didn't know what they were doing purported to know what they were doing and set something up. That required us bringing in another person with a different set of eyes that did know what he was doing and who was able to fix it. So there's sort of this issue that happens when non-technical people try and hire technical people, which is that you saw this a few years ago. I mean, it's been a few years now, but with everybody hiring a 16-year-old to run their Twitter accounts. So it was just like, oh, well, kids know Twitter, so get kids, but it's like, so it was this weird time where every company was hiring just some idiot kid that doesn't know anything except for how to run Twitter and letting them be the brand voice of their company. And so, so with technical stuff like this, where there's not necessarily one path, right? And I think this is where the challenge lies, is that there isn't, in most cases, maybe one solution to a problem, right? You guys might have an approach, somebody else might have a different approach. And it doesn't mean that one's right or one's wrong. Each could maybe be measured on its own merits. But how do you, I guess, avoid making a misstep like that in the first place, whether you're hiring people outsourced or you're bringing somebody in? Like, I mean, is there a surefire way to try and protect yourself in those instances if you're sort of non-technical, beholden to the whims of a technical person?
Don't just talk to one person, right? I think, what we see folks do is they'll elevate their senior developer past their point of expertise. So, okay, I'll make my senior developer my CTO. Those are two completely different roles. And then we also see, and I think that's why you're seeing this word fractional be so popular, right? Because I could go talk to 2 or 3 different fractional CFOs and hear slightly different things. Most of it would be the same, but I might hear slightly different things. And then that's where I could interrogate more. Like, okay, well, why does one CFO think this and another? And I still haven't spent as much money as I would spend in a month with a full-time CFO, not to mention I might have to give them equity. Like, I'm taking a lot of risks with these full-time executives when I could talk to 2, 3 and almost have a panel of executives. And then when I really find one that understands me and I like working with them, then I can invest a little more and try to capitalize their time a little bit. But I think that's the beauty of this, is you can kind of query the market through folks. And I think the other thing about Fractional is they work with many. They're not just like going to get horse blinders on your particular environment and your particular problem. So we work with 20 clients. We know what they're trying and what's working for them. And we know what we've seen over the past 10 years, and we're able to kind of compare all that and say, okay, yeah, you can make that decision. Let me help you see around that corner and tell you what good would come of it, and what risks there might be. And most of the time when you're talking to the 15-year-old kid, he doesn't know anything about what could happen, and he can't really paint a scenario. Even your senior developer becomes CTO is really just taking orders from you and not saying, okay, I love your ideas. Here's what might happen if we go down that road, or if we press on that pedal too much.
Yeah.
Love it.
No, that makes sense. I'd like to kind of keep going in the CTO path, which is, what do these engagements look like? So Mike talked a little bit about the, the initial consult and how that stuff goes, but, and again, and I'm just playing, I guess, maybe selfishly a little bit of the role of the, not totally technical, co-founder or partner who's hiring a fractional CTO in this situation. But like, how does that role work in that? Does the CTO come in with sort of an open-ended mandate to just do whatever, whenever? Is there a goal up front? Do you help people assess goals? I imagine, and you can tell me if this is true or not, but I imagine that you run into, on occasion, a CEO, a company founder, whoever it is that's hiring you. I imagine you run into one on occasion that maybe underestimates or doesn't understand the complexity of their ask. So they've got to, hey, I want to build this really cool app, make it happen. Oh, well, that's a year worth of work. I thought I could get it done in 6 weeks. So
Sure.
how do you step into an environment like that, help them sort of assess their needs properly? And then, what's that engagement look like in terms of setting goals and reaching OKRs, et cetera?
Yeah, yeah. So a big fan of the OKRs. If a company already has those, then that's fantastic. I'm always shocked how many folks don't have any kind of operating plan. So they, so like then we're kind of going to like consulting 101. But let's assume, since you use the term OKR, that you're past that point. Then yeah,
Why
we're
don't
doing
you
things like
why don't you define that for our listeners in case they don't know?
yeah. So OKRs is a goal setting strategy, objective key result. It's just it's the book to read is Measure What Matters. It's a further evolution from SMART goals, or uh, like measurable business outcomes, MBOs, and it's just been popularized by Google and some other Silicon Valley companies that really wanted to give an objective and then how they were going to measure it. And then if you're in a larger organization, it cascades through the org. And it just gets people dialed into like, not only am I trying to accomplish something like be the best, but how do I know I'm being the best, right? How do I measure that? So getting people to be data driven is kind of part of it. And so if you have that level of maturity, then yeah, we do. We just have tons of plays in our playbook for different challenges, and we're kind of looking for that challenge. So in your example, it's like, hey, I want to accomplish something huge in a short amount of time. So we'll functionally deconstruct their ask, right? We'll just it's kind of a mind mapping tool, and then, well, what about this? What about this? And as we questions precede clarity. So as we ask questions, the founder goes, oh shoot, I don't even know how to explain that to you. Okay, well then that's complexity, and then we're kind of unpacking it. So pretty quickly they come to realize that that their idea is bigger, and then of course we want to help them get people starting to break that idea down and work on what for sure you need. So you're building an app, you probably need authentication and authorization. You need somebody to create an account and log in. Can we go ahead and get started on that? And then live to solve the next problem at the next time. Along this topic, though, I find people have a difficult, like their appetite, when their appetite is really big, it does take some effort to get them to think just not smaller. Like I don't want to have a bunch of premature children, type of products like that just aren't viable. But I do want to say, well, what is something that your users could use that gets into that? Like, start small. And I've seen from successful entrepreneurs, the ones who can think, think compartmentally. We worked with a great startup called Forte. Forte is a place where you can go get online music lessons, and we built their like in lesson experience, great sound quality. gets the full value of your mic, lets notes sustain. Echo cancellation tends to cancel notes. They sound like noise to voice, voice audio. So they were really good. Those founders were really good at saying, all we care about right now is the in-lesson experience. If we have to manually send out studio links to get people to have these lessons on the platform, we'll do that. And so they didn't get into scheduling, and they didn't get into payments, and they didn't get into a lot of other features because they wanted to nail the in-lesson experience. And that allowed them to further the business forward and get into usage and start really figuring out if the business was work. And they're doing quite good. Just signed a really big deal with Sweetwater.
Nice.
And it was, and their success, I believe, was directly related to their ability to see clearly what the versions of the software were going to look like, to focus on in lesson and then come back later and add scheduling and payments.
So do you think, I mean, is that sort of akin to I guess the MVP model of doing development, which is they decided their minimum viable product was that no matter what, when people get here, they must have a great lesson. So
That's
however
right.
they get here is irrelevant, we'll solve it. But this is what we've got to have for now.
That's right. And they were willing to be scrappy with those other fringe things until they could prove that piece of the product out.
Yeah, and I love that as an example because I think for a lot of people, they look at something as the whole, right? And I always use the dumb metaphor that people use of eating the car, right? That it's a car. You can't eat the whole car in one bite, right? You're going to have to nibble at the car for some time, and you're going to have to pick your parts and you're going to have to work at it, and
have good
So
teeth.
the expectation shouldn't be that you're getting the whole car at once. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And but what insights do you have, or how do you make decisions on that? And maybe this goes back to our OKR discussion, which is, where do we start landing on what our MVP even is? I think for the wildly ambitious, it's really hard to whittle down and start making decisions like that. So as a fractional CTO, how do you advise your clients to identify that?
And I want to add on to this before you
as
go
a guy
into
who's
it.
had some MVPs, my kids. So
So like your founder, right, has the overall arching vision of what you want. And if you're going into an existing project, obviously you have a framework in place and kind of an idea and all that. But if you're going into a blank canvas, you have to decide on what tech stack you want to use, whether it's Python, JavaScript, React, React Native, Next.js, all these different options. And you have to kind of decide. And I'm sure in the process of the initial consult, you figure that out. But if you just jump with an MVP where you're sending a link for a Zoom call to do a music lesson, that doesn't really involve anything as far as deciding factors for a tech stack. So kind of you have to have the end goal in mind when you just define the MVP, so you start on the right foot. Can you maybe...
Yeah, so I think that this kind of is like a core. What is the core problem you're trying to solve, and like kind of what is the most challenging piece of it? Like for Forte, the most challenging piece was that the lesson was going to sound good, that we could push the browser environment, and some off-the-shelf video conferencing tools to this nth degree, like to get good note sustain and have a good lesson. So the business really wasn't worth building unless we could prove that. The rest of the problem solving was how to get that in the hands of users without having to write too much code. And so, there was just focus. Focus is currency. I think you guys would agree that focus is currency for all digital. Mm-hmm. There's so many things that you can play with that focus is really important. Not trying to solve 4 things at once. You won't get any of them in a reasonable amount of time. You gotta kind of serialize. This idea of multitasking is not applicable past how our wives manage our kids.
Yeah. I'm notorious for that. I'm the guy that squirrel. Oh,
Yeah.
It's just a bad habit of mine. And I'm currently in the process of, like I went down the React Native track because, a native app on your phone, that's cool. But I already have 90% of it done on a web app. Why should I take that squirrel and chase it, get the web app going first and then after you have that functioning correctly, then go down that route.
On the frameworks and languages, I've been very agnostic over the years. Even Particle is very agnostic. At Legal Inc, they already had a pretty decent PHP footprint. So we did PHP on Laravel, and we enjoyed it. We really enjoyed it, like the Laravel framework. So I think mature frameworks are really good. A lot of what we're seeing in the market is the JavaScript throughout. So the Next and Nest with React on the front end, everything's TypeScript. We're seeing that just because there's always been this dream of the full stack developer, and so the Next Nest kind of React TypeScript ecosystem tends to be the best promise right now of this idea of full stack development and being really good at all the layers of the stack. I don't buy it to 100%. I think it's great when you have a bunch of seniors that can move around. I just think that like front end development is such a skill all by itself. Being able to take Figma designs and make them behave properly is a skill in of itself. And you want that person to have a strong opinion about usability that a backend developer is not likely to have. Whereas you want your backend guy to be all about security and data and naming things great. And to me, it's always going to be this idea of full stack's a little bit of a facade.
I think
we understand why people are wanting it. It's an alluring concept.
I think solutions like Convex and Supabase and the built-in backend options are kind of the answer to that problem, because you can essentially be a front-end guy and get a functioning, well-working backend with Convex and have TypeScript in it, built in. And then you have Clerk and your authentication all built. And it's getting there, but I understand what you're saying.
To me, in the end, it will be interesting to see where those products are in the end. I think in the end, likely the end user is not satisfied with using those tools, because the customer experience feels disjointed and like you strapped a bunch of things together, right? Whereas in the open source community or in the open source development, you are strapping a bunch of things together, but in a cohesion, right? Where you're not limited. You can make those things, you can like have a real seamless experience.
Sure.
I just think in the end, people feel that. I'm working with a couple of clients right now that did the low code, no code route. They scaled beyond the first low code, no code provider, and now they're working with the second. And low code, no code platforms like Mendex really scales, but you end up with experts that know Mendex. So you're still having to pay for expertise, and you have to pay the license. Where in the custom world, you have to pay developers, and you will probably always be paying developers to work on, iterate, and move the thing forward. But you don't have a license. You have a hosting cost, but you just have more freedom.
Sure.
And the promise of the low code, no code is, well, I won't need engineers, and that's just not true. You're still going to need people with expertise in those platforms.
I don't think there's a no developer solution for any custom platform out there. If you're just trying to get a splash page website up there, sure. But if you're looking for something that's custom and that's going to actually do what you want it to do, developers have to be part of the equation. Convex itself is really quite cool, because really it's just, you're still creating models, you're still creating hooks, and it's just a functioning backend where it's a little bit easier for someone who does know how to develop to do it without having to write their own APIs, which is neat.
Cool.
Anyways, I'm rambling tech stuff. Ryan, do you have a question you would like to ask?
Well, I kind of wanted to see if we can maybe talk a little bit about just velocity on a team. So, and I think this is a good thing to talk about, basically on the heels of what you were just talking about, which is, I think this, I don't know, the notion of the all-in-one developer who can do everything and be your full stack guy, I think comes from the notion of, I'm trying to save money. So if I can have one person that does everything, I don't need to have lots of people doing things. So if we can display that in our customers or in the people that you're working with, where you can say, you know what, one person really can't do this. As the reality is, you're going to have a team of people. So you put 2 or 3 people on the team, and you have to decide, how to best use those resources, how to gain velocity. How do you assemble a team or put together the right people and get people in place so that you can move, I guess, at the rate that you might perceive that you would get out of a single individual who could just do everything? Like if you had this magic person, I think the idea is that you could move fast and do it cheap. So how, by layering on, 2-3 people at a time or whatever, how do you, I guess, go from, I guess I think of the metaphor a lot of like an airplane taking off. It takes a little bit of time to get some momentum, and then eventually, things sort of go up and to the right. So, how do we do that with an outsourced dev team?
So we run all product and project management from the US, so we can have those awesome collaboration sessions. And I don't think there's any magic here. It's just like being really good at how to collaborate and each person knowing their role. The way we do that inside a Particle is we have practice leads that think about how design should be done, how designers are responsible from the handoff to front-end engineers, how front-end engineers are supposed to pick up that design and rapidly build the front end while the back end is coming into place. Are we following patterns that we know work? Are we leveraging AI properly to make all of that super efficient? And the practice areas inside a Particle are the ones thinking about all of that and then documenting those SOPs and those patterns so that they're there and ready for the team. It's not rocket surgery. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're trying to follow established patterns and then spend the most time on the things that are, fringe or research and development oriented. That's why I really call it a software factory approach, because we want to use that. That doesn't mean we don't stay flat and talk. It's not like just give me your order and I'll go do that. We're not doing pizzas here, but that we each should know our role on the factory floor and be executing our role with excellence.
So, and what is the, like, sort of, I don't know. I mean, of course, every application is different. So, like, I'm not holding you to this, but like, what's the average kind of ramp up on something like this? Like, so somebody, reaches out to Particle 41. They say, hey, Ben, I'd like to engage with you. What does that timeline look like? Like, if somebody's trying to get up to speed quick, I mean, are you guys pretty agile in that way? Is there just kind of a learning period that just takes?
Yeah, the way we do that is, 4 to 6 weeks we're up and running, but we usually immediately sign a lead that's starting to talk to you about what your requirements are. So a PM and a lead are going to be assigned. They're going to start collecting your requirements. A designer is going to bolt on, start, if you need that, start the Figmas. And we're going to get sprint 0 done to really establish like what are the things we know we need right off the jump. Our DevOps team already has terraforms and boilerplates for dev environments and all of that. Mm-hmm. So usually that's a quick launch. And we're just, I think we think of the metaphor of like paratrooping in. And a lot of the projects we get involved are already in flight and maybe having like a performance issue, so we're really good at like, where is everything, where are the bodies buried? What's the field of view here? And we have playbooks for quickly ramping up. So we're not 6 weeks in trying to figure out where the bathroom's at.
How does it work too, like with personnel? Like, is there an evolution in personnel? So like, I'll just give you an example. On our team, we have kind of what we look at as almost like a spectrum. And I don't know if this is the right way to look at it, but it's how we look at it, which is we've got guys that are sort of more tailored to front end. Maybe they don't have deep knowledge in back end work, but they're really good at UI, and that's kind of where they live. Then we have sort of like these in-betweeners that, they have a little bit of UI, but then they do, a little bit more back end. So they've got sort of that bridge the gap there. And then we move into a guy that's a little deeper until we have a guy that's just like APIs and, living in the back, and we close the door and kind of just hide him back there and don't tell anyone about it. So, I mean, so we've got like that kind of spectrum. I mean, does your personnel, like as you work through a product, do you kind of move around, or do you have a spectrum like that you kind of work from, or, how do you, I guess, assign people properly?
Yeah. No, generally speaking, we're looking for like, what is their core language, and then front end, back end. tends to be a really good split. We also have DevOps people that are really good at that discipline, data engineers that are good at that discipline, and then QA folks. So yeah, there is an aspect of reskilling, but it's very carefully used. And generally the reskilling is not taking people completely outside of, the kind of career that they want to grow.
Okay. That makes sense. So, okay. Well, so then I guess the other thing I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about is like getting near completion on a project. Like, so how do we know, like at the end of our engagement, like, and again, maybe this goes back to the engagement, which is if we establish goals and maybe the goal is, get live and pass QA, like what does that look like as our project sort of starts to come to an end, but let's say it needs to go into sort of an ongoing maintenance mode, or we need to start into version 2, like how do you transition from one job into the next?
So the way we typically engage is in between staff aug and project work. So you're subscribing to the teammates that you need on the team.
Okay.
So that would kind of match up with like staff aug. You're paying monthly for, if you need a back end, a front end, and a QA, and a project manager and a designer for your launch, then you're paying monthly for those folks to be fully dedicated to you. When you come to the end of your project, typically what we see is that just means you're planning V2. Our average length of engagement is 24 plus months, because before we come to the end of that MVP, we're already thinking about what are we going to do for the next set and the next set. So those are the kinds of projects. A lot of times when we do like application modernization or cloud migrations or these kind of more enterprise type projects, there is kind of a fixed window, like, hey, we need to get this migration done this year. We may ramp up to get all of that work done, and then we may just ramp down. And we don't have long-term contracts, so we're like 30 days notice if we need to ramp down. And we like working that way. So it's very flexible for us. And our question back to the business is, okay, well, what kind of capacity do you want us to manage to what outcome according to your direction? So we call it the managed capacity model. And it's taking those aspects of project work that are outcome based, but the financial aspect of staff augmentation, and kind of marrying them together so that we're focused on the goal, but we have very understandable monthly billing. And I think our clients love this style of working, especially for software development that's so iterative. And the outcome, like as you get closer to an outcome, you're just thinking of the next one. And so we don't need to refactor contracts and rewrite SOWs and all of that. We're just your partner moving forward on your next objective.
So, and do you guys help on sort of, I guess, the business of these things too, right? I mean, obviously, developing the app is one thing, but in your role as CTO, or despite being fractional, as CTO,
that's right.
Do you lean into some of the, the grander business discussions, the product strategy, things like that? Especially if you're working with like a founder that's maybe expert in a field, but doesn't necessarily know, how to market to them or whatever.
Yeah, as much as they'll let us. We love, like, part of our QBR framework, our quarterly business review framework, is to know, hey, what is your next goal? What is our team hunting for? Like, what are they trying to hit, and how can we best help them? Because we also want to let them know the other side of the story. Like if they're saying, hey, we want to get all this work done by such and such date, we want to get all that work planned so that we can give them a mathematical answer on why they might need more teammates. Like if they have a huge body of work, we go estimate that work. Our velocity is X, and really our velocity needs to be north of that. We need to start having that discussion early so that more teammates might impact that outcome. So we want to be involved in the goal so that they don't get to the end and we're like, well, hey, we still got all this other work to do. And we didn't give them that, not bad news, but that other side of the story, that like, hey, your goal is this means you need a few more people to work on it. We don't want to just be smelling the roses up until, they're deliverable and it's late.
Yeah. Well, I hate to say this, but I know Ryan has a hard out, so we've kind of hit that time. On parting ways, can you maybe tell people how they can get in touch with you? And then also, is there a minimum kind of like engagement that they need to come to the table with to acquire your services?
Not really, not on the minimum, but I'm I just love talking to people, so I definitely don't want to put a minimum price tag on just getting to know you. So you can come to my LinkedIn profile, Benjamin Johnson on LinkedIn, or you can go to particle41.com. The call to action is the same in both places. On my LinkedIn, I have a book appointment link. On Particle 41, just schedule a call. Those all go to me, and I would love to spend 30 minutes just like understanding what challenge you have, or how this episode has maybe given you just giving you encouragement to reach out to me. I love having those conversations and exploring what your challenges are and how I might be able to help.
Love
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Ben. This has been awesome, and I definitely have more questions for you. I could talk another hour. So anyway,
Cool.
let's we'll continue this conversation at a later date. So thank you so much for making time for us today, though. That's awesome to have you.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Mike.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And we'll see you guys next time.